What's up, marketers, and welcome to another episode of the Growth Colony podcast. I'm Liza from X-Growth to tell you that each episode we bring in B2B leaders to chat about how you can achieve those everyday wins in the marketing world. Whether you're new to the B2B game, working at a leadership level, or even just showing some interest, we know you'll love the episode. So grab a drink, get comfy, and enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Growth Colony. This is Shahin, your host, and today we're in for a real treat. My guest today has played a pivotal role in companies that have become household names. I'm talking about none other than Guy Kawasaki. Guy is the chief evangelist of Canva, author of Think Remarkable and 15 other books, host of the Remarkable People podcast, and adjunct professor of the University of California, Santa Cruz. He was the chief evangelist of Apple, Mercedes-Benz brand ambassador, and trustee of the Wikimedia Foundation. Today, Guy is here to dive into his latest book, Think Remarkable, where he shares insights on making meaningful impacts both in life and business, a topic I know a lot of us listening here are eager to explore. Guy, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Well, I am. Well, listen, we had a little bit of a pre-recording chatter, so I'm happy to be here, right? And, let's just have a lot of fun, and maybe we can even inspire a few people today. So
it's a
start
pleasure
firing your questions.
It's a pleasure having you. I mean, the first question I want to ask you is, what kind of was the catalyst for writing this book? What made you want to write it?
Big advance.
The big advance?
That's a joke. You're supposed to laugh. Oh my God. Oh my God. We're gonna need another take at that joke. I mean, okay, that's a good joke. That's not my fault. You should have laughed faster. I mean, I think you were in such shock, like, oh my God, my first guest on my podcast who was honest with me. I asked him why he wrote the book, and he said, big advance. I didn't know what to say. So yeah, I got a big advance. But listen, so here's the genesis of the book. I have a podcast called Remarkable People, and I have remarkable people. Duh, that's why I named it that. And I have Jane Goodall, Stacey Abrams, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Christy Yamaguchi, Carol Dweck, Steve Wozniak. I have really great guests. And so now I'm in the fifth year. So I have about 250 hours and 5,000 pages of transcripts. And we figured out nobody's going to read or listen to all that. So we need to put it in a digestible format. And then, in a 1 hour interview, it's not like I can tell you that all 60 minutes is brilliant, right? So you want to just cherry pick like the great stories and the great lessons. And so we wrote a book, and the book is organized into 3 sections: growth, grit, and grace, which is the 3 sort of stages of making a difference and being remarkable. And within that, it's organized by topic as opposed to by person. Because I've read some podcast books where they, publish the transcript, and you got to do a lot of digging through those transcripts to find those little nuggets of gold. And also, I don't think it helps you, because if you have guest 1 talk about grit, and then guest 15 talk about grit, and then guest 30 talk about grit, and those things are 50, 60, 75 pages apart, and you're thinking, oh, somebody else talked about grit. What did she say? And then you come on the next one, and what else did I learn about grit? And so, what you want is a book that's organized, like all the stuff about grit is one place, all the stuff about growth is one place, all the stuff about sales is one place, all the stuff about passion is one place. So I organized it by topic, not by person.
I love that. And I was going through the book, and that makes a lot of sense. And I, just like yourself, I've read a couple of books, and navigation of those books are hard work.
Believe me.
A lot of highlights and a lot of kind of sticky notes here and there, and referring to one another. But that makes perfect sense. In the book, there is a concept that you've mentioned, and you said, find a hero. And
Right.
we have a lot of marketers who are listening to this podcast.
Okay.
And I'd really like to, can you unpack that? What do you mean by find a hero? Why is that critical?
Finding a hero is critical because it's it's a little bit of an inspiration and north star, so that let's say that you're a marketer, and you need to find a hero. So who might be a hero for you? You might say, God help you, Elon Musk. Oh, well, this is we have to go backdate this podcast 3 years, but you could say Steve Jobs, because the way he demonstrated new products was just heroic, just remarkable. No one could demo a product like Steve Jobs. And so you need these people so that you can aspire to something. And it's no different than a little kid, watching Tom Brady win the Super Bowl and saying, someday I'm going to be Tom Brady, or Christy Yamaguchi watching another skater who's at the time 20 years older than her. She wants to be her. I don't mean to be only sports analogies, because sports analogies break down in business quite often. So listen, when I was in college, there's Andrew Gore, and there's Hewlett and Packard, and you need heroes like that. They give you faith. They give you hope.
I'm also really curious of, they talk about, this is a common saying, right? You don't want to meet your heroes.
Yeah.
Do you feel that is true? Is from in your experience, that has that also been true? Whether that is a organization that you're
Well,
aspiring to, or heroes in your own
um,
mind.
God help it if some people think I'm their hero and they meet me, because then they could be saying, "Yeah, shit, that was right. I should not have met Guy," and like I'm all disappointed, But I will say that I have met a lot of my heroes because of this podcast. So this podcast, it opens doors that nothing else could, right? So when your first guest is Jane Goodall, you know,
It's
it's
a strong
all, yeah,
opening.
it's easy street from there, right? I mean, every subsequent guest, they say, "Who else has been in your podcast?" I say, Jane Goodall. Maybe you heard of her. Maybe you'd like to be on the same show with Jane Goodall. So I met Jane Goodall. I become friends with her. Yeah, and if you look at Christy Yamaguchi, Ronnie Lott, if you look at Bob Cialdini, Carol Dweck, Angela Duckworth, Steve Wozniak, you just go down the line. I love meeting my heroes. My heroes have not disappointed me.
I love it. Oh, so don't subscribe to the school of
Well, okay. Well, some of it is on you, in the fact that it's your judgment of who you put on the pedestal, right? So, like, if you put Elon Musk on the pedestal, I mean, not clear to me. You should go meet him right now. And then if you're like, if you put all these self help gurus, right? And these are this is Joe Blow, who wrote The Blow Away, and he started a 7-digit company that is now you know the Blow Company, and he wrote a book called The Blow Away by Blow Press about his success at the Blow Company. I can pretty much tell you that you're gonna meet Joe Blow and you're gonna be disappointed. I can tell you that right now. I mean, you have to aim high with these heroes. Don't you know?
don't go low. Yeah,
Yeah,
aspiration.
don't go low. I mean, and then arguably, if you meet your heroes and you're disappointed, whose fault is that? It might not be the hero's fault. It might be your fault. You picked the wrong person.
Interesting. Interesting. How do you see that from the perspective of companies having heroes? Do you think that concept is also true from a perspective of an organization aspiring to another organization?
You mean like,
Like us as a company looking at, I don't know, Apple as an inspiration, saying, we want to be like Apple, or another podcaster looking at a bigger podcast company, or
yeah, I
you know
mean,
not from a person to person, but an organization to organization.
well, I mean, I think with Apple that would be well placed, and I'm not an Apple employee anymore. I think if you use Canva as your hero, that would also be well placed. But you can obviously make some very big mistakes that way. And when you find out about their greenwashing or their social responsibility is just bullshit, or they shut down all their DEI programs. I mean, or you looked up to a politician and then you found the politician was cheating on his spouse or her spouse, and then was taking payments from lobbyists. And I mean, listen. Heroes serve a role for inspiration and information. Okay, but uh, at the end of the day, I think you need to use them as a means to an end, and they further your making a difference and being remarkable. Don't go overboard with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to ask another question about another concept that you talk about in your book, and which is kind of the opposite of this. You talk about use your doubters.
Yes.
Can you unpack
Yeah.
that?
So, I mean, this has been very important for me, that using my doubters, and what this means that you're going to encounter people in your life who say you can't do it, you shouldn't do it, you're not good enough, you're not fast enough, young enough, tall enough, smart enough, technical enough, whatever. And I'll tell you something, if you start listening to people who don't know you and you use their estimate of your ability to judge your own ability, man, you are headed for a disaster. I mean, you cannot let those people put you in a box. You cannot let those people restrict you. And so there's one thing, which is to just ignore them, but the other thing is to take it to the extreme, which is what I've tended to do, which is I've gone beyond like just denial. I'm like actively trying to prove them wrong. And I say in the book, for one thing, I support envy. I think envy is a good thing. I think my message is that it does not matter how you got motivated. What's important is that you got motivated. So I tell these stories in the book that when I was a kid growing up in Hawaii, I got robbed on the public bus twice. And once in high school, this friend of my family gave me a ride in his Porsche 911. And I'm telling you right now that a big part of the motivation for me to study and work hard was I never wanted to live in a place where I was going to get robbed on the bus, or I could not drive a German car like a 911. So, when you ask people, it's kind of getting back to, why'd you write the book? So when you ask people, what motivated you when you were young, and they say, well, I wanted to end climate change, I wanted to end poverty, I wanted to ensure fresh water for everybody, I wanted to stop crime, I wanted to create a democratic, republic. I mean, God bless you. I mean, there are people like that, right? But I'm telling you, Guy Kawasaki, I was motivated by not changing the world, but changing the car. Now, judge me harshly if you will, but I'm telling you, that's what is the motivation. And now, I mean, I've gone beyond that. So it's not like I stopped there. But is there anything wrong with that? Is there anything wrong with wanting something like that motivated you to work hard and study hard? And then working hard and study hard, you realize that there's more to life than cars. So, I mean, guilty as charged if you find that wrong. Mea culpa.
So there are two concepts that you bring up there, right? There's the doubters, and then there's envy. And
Yes.
one is from your side and the other one is from an external
Yes.
source.
Yes.
Would you go as far as saying that, whatever you're doing in life, if you don't have doubters, maybe you're not. Let me rephrase this question. What about people that are listening to this and they're like, well, I don't really have any doubters. Like, no one has really put me down, or, said something that I can't do this or I can't do that. What are your thoughts on that?
I'd say if somebody said that, they should look harder
Mm.
because I find it extremely unlikely that, there's not anybody in your life who doesn't think you can succeed. Now, many people may just shut up, or maybe many people are be too subtle or too kind or something. But I mean, if you're the chosen one and it's so obvious that you're going to be such a winner in life, you do not need to read this book. Let me save you $25 right now. Don't buy this book. Just go buy a book of, how to evade long-term capital gain. I mean, you might need that book more than my book, but I'm for the other 99.999% of the world who they have doubters, they envy other people, and they also have self-doubt, because I think that describes just about everybody. And if you're in the category and you're listening, say, Guy, I have no self-doubt and there's nobody who doubts me. Um, I would say that you're probably delusional. you know, you this has a pretty good warning signs there that it, I would say that if you have the growth mindset, if you believe you can learn new skills and do new things, there should be some doubt in your mind, right? There should be some, like, you're opening yourself up to vulnerability, that you're willing to take a few wounds to better your game, to learn more stuff. And I bet you if you ask Jane Goodall, did you ever doubt yourself? She would say yes. Steve Jobs, I don't know. Elon Musk, I'm pretty sure he would say he never doubted himself. But then, you can guess what I think of Elon Musk. So
Reading between lines. Reading between lines. What about, could it also have an element of, and what I meant by self doubt? I'm 100%. I can see what you mean there with regards to the doubters, because I've definitely read about this, and I was reading the section of the book as well that talked about, you really need to use that as fuel. Could it also be that if you don't find yourself people disagreeing with you, or quote unquote doubters, could it be also that what you're aiming for is not big enough, or it's not as critical enough, and you got to go
that's
back
true.
and think and aim higher? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great insight. So yeah, if nobody doubts that, I don't know, you could have this low level job. I mean, that's great. Nobody doubts it, but then yeah, I think a more meaningful doubt is, can this person achieve something beyond the trivial? And for that to happen, you have to make it known that you want to do something more than trivial, right? And so,
Mm,
I mean, I cannot build a case where it's a healthy situation where literally nobody doubts you. I mean, well, I think actually, if that's the case, if literally nobody doubts you, and literally that nobody doubts you, I think that's a horrendous amount of pressure, right? I mean, you're like, you're the golden child, everything. I don't know, you went to Harvard, you got your Harvard MBA, you worked this summer at McKinsey, and now Goldman Sachs is after you, and everybody thinks you're going to be like the world's greatest hedge fund and all that, and nobody doubts you. And I don't think that's a healthy situation.
mm. We have a lot of, as I said, a lot of marketers, and a lot of people in the B2B space as well who listen to our podcast. One of the things that you talk about in your book is creating subcategories.
Yes.
Why is that? Why is that important?
Okay, so this is the wisdom of David Ocker. He is the father of branding. And what he told me is that, Guy, in 2024, it's kind of hard to create a new category. I mean, we've been at it for 2024 years, arguably more, but, let's just say 2024 years. We've been at it. We've been trying to make new stuff, market stuff, and all that. So, more or less, the categories have been invented. Now, if you are two guys in a garage, two gals in a garage, a guy and a gal in the garage, and you're saying, no, but I'm going to invent a new category. No one has ever thought of this. It's never been done before. The flip side of that is, oh my God, you have such an educational process, right? So, like, if you said, we have an electric car, we're going to make it a new category. My advice would be, you know what? Instead of trying to make it a new category called electric cars, why don't you just own the category that is a subcategory of all cars? Because then you won't have to explain to people what a car is. I mean, people know what cars are already. Just say you want only that portion which is electric. I think that's a much easier sell than saying, hey, forget everything you know about cars. I'm going to, this is a whole new category. I think that's way too hard. I can't, I'm trying to think, what's the last category you think has been invented? Everything I think of, I can think of it's a subcategory. If you started Impossible Meats, it's the category of meat that is not based on animals. That's a lot better than saying I got this new substance, and it's protein and it's red and it bleeds, but it's not meat. It's not meat. It's a new category, right? I mean, if I were you, I would just, you got enough battles to fight, especially if you're a marketer. You got enough battles to fight. Don't fight total ignorance and, try to create a new category. Just be happy to take a big piece of an existing category.
Even going after existing categories or subcategories, as you call them, that on its own is hard as well. And then a lot of things that we've talked about here is challenging. And in your book, you also talk about work-life balance.
Yes.
Let's dive a little bit there. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on work-life balance.
This is the first point of this interview where we're going to start to lose potential readers, but such is life. And my statement is that I think that work-life balance is a myth. That this concept that, you can be half work and half life, and you can thread that needle and you can raise a family and start a company and do everything, I think is a myth. I think that there are stages in life where you just have to pay the price. And there are other stages in life where you're just going to coast. And, I can break it down into thirds. So the first third of your life, you're going to be overworked and underpaid. The second third of your life, you're going to be overpaid and underworked. And then if you want to be remarkable, the third third of your life is where you pay back. Okay. So now at the end of your life, if you could add up all the minutes that you spent doing everything, maybe you can get a 50-50 work-life balance. Okay. But when you're young, it's going to be 70-30 work life. And then maybe as you're middle age, maybe it's 30-70 work life. And then when you're old, it's, zero work, 100% life. And when you add up all those times, God bless you, it's going to be 50-50. But at any given random moment, it ain't going to be 50-50. Just give it up. Don't set yourself up for expectations and set yourself up for failure thinking, oh my God, something is wrong. Why do I not have a perfect 50-50 balance in my life? Well, it's because you're young and you're building your reputation and you're paying the price, and that's just the way it is. But someday you're going to be old like Guy and you're going to live off what you did in your 30s. Hallelujah, baby.
That's it is definitely a dividing conversation, and it's just there are definitely it's one of those topics that there are diehard fans on both sides, but I really like kind of getting that insight from you. And now there's one other component. I mean, there are a lot of insights that stood out for me, but there was one other that I wanted to touch on, and there's a title in your book called Mission Driven Asshole.
Yes.
And I saw that, I was reading it, and I was like, we need to talk about this. Because we talked about heroes, we talked about, and some of these individuals have very colorful, personalities. Can you unpack that? Can you talk about what do you mean by mission driven asshole?
Okay, so I have been in Silicon Valley since 1983. So, let's just call it. I've been in Silicon Valley in the trenches for about 40 years. So I have become an expert about assholes. And I don't mean in the proctology sense. I mean assholes as people. And so I have figured out that, assholes pretty much bifurcate. And there are two kinds of fundamental assholes. So one asshole is an ego-driven asshole. It's like me, myself, and I, glorification. My personal assistant has a personal assistant. I have a personal driver. I have a personal PR person. I have esthetician and it's all about me, the glorification of myself. That's the asshole. Now, the mission driven asshole is not about himself or herself, it's about the mission. Now, the crowning example of mission driven asshole, of course, is our favorite Steve Jobs. Now, he was a mission driven asshole. I never thought it was about him. It wasn't about the glorification of Steve Jobs. He was on a mission to make the world's greatest computer and to increase people's creativity and productivity. And if you stood in the way of that, you were going to get run over. And when you got run over, you would think, oh, I just got run over by an asshole. But that asshole did not run you over because he wanted to glorify himself. That asshole ran over you because you were an impediment to his mission, which is making the world's best computer. Now, I don't want people to get the impression that guy says, okay, you got to be a mission-driven asshole to succeed in life, because I can give you an example of a person who's 180 degrees opposite of that, which is Melanie Perkins, who's the CEO of Canva. So Melanie Perkins is just the utter opposite of being an asshole. And look at the success she's had with Canva. Now, I'm obviously conflicted because I'm chief evangelist of Canva, but I got to call it as I see it. And, Melanie Perkins is proof you don't need to be an asshole to succeed.
Interesting. Okay. there's a bunch of questions that
I got time. I got time.
Well, let me ask this. There's a lot of stories. You talked about Steve Jobs. There are a lot of stories on Steve Jobs' kind of approach to things. What I'm really interested to hear is, can you think of an example of when you were in the room or you heard of or whatever it was that some interaction that Steve Jobs had with someone, and your mouth, whether it was literally or figuratively, dropped of him being an asshole?
That was a daily occurrence.
We're only going to talk about one. What is the first thing that comes to mind?
Well, I mean, I saw him just rip people, right? And again, mission-driven asshole. And so he would rip people. And I got to tell you, it was shocking, but quite honestly, I lived in fear of being ripped by him in public. Now, with all modern HR theory, you'd say, oh, God, that is such a destructive atmosphere. You're always second guessing yourself. You're always worried. You're never sure. How can you do your best work? Well, I don't know what to tell you, but I can tell you that I did my best work under those conditions because I was scared shitless of being humiliated. And contrary to what everybody says, fear is a great motivator. Now, there's one caveat though. You have to fear somebody that you think is right? So if Steve Jobs rips you for a design or rips you for, a sub acceptable result in whatever you were supposed to do, I would say you could be pretty confident that Steve was right? So if someone has the taste and someone has the courage to rip you when you have failed, they're actually doing you a favor in the long run. And I think many people work for people who they just don't have the judgment or the taste to know when you suck. And that's a bad thing because you're never going to learn to suck less if somebody tells you when you're sucking. That's an important skill. And I think as I look back, Steve Jobs was the toughest boss. I had an English teacher in high school who was the toughest teacher. And I look at that, I say, you know what? Those are the people I learned the most from. It's not the ones that I could bullshit in Buffalo. It's the ones that just ripped me. This is a sports analogy and it may land flat because both of these coaches are dead. But if you're really curious, go Google Vince Lombardi of the Green Bay Packers, right? And he was such a tough coach. He would just scream at his players and all that, but his players loved him. right? Nobody would ever say, I wish I never played for the Green Bay Packers. Or I think the same thing is true of Bobby Knight at Indiana, right? Now, maybe we were just all in the reality distortion field. So, we lost touch of what was really happening. But I got to tell you, I think Steve Jobs made me a better employee. There's no doubt in my mind. Now, it may not have been the kindest, gentlest way. And I'm not saying this is the only way, but I'm telling you, he got results. And it's not a style that I emulate. And yet I appreciate having kind of grown up under it. So that's now. What I'm really cognizant of is I don't want people listening to this and saying, "Oh, I listened to Guy Kawasaki on a podcast, and he said be an asshole if you want to be a success." I am not saying that. Okay, but I tell you something. As a boss, I think that you are doing your employees a disfavor if you don't give them critical, honest feedback. You may think in the short run I'm being a nice guy and all that, but in the long run, you're doing them harm.
I want to change tracks a little bit. And,
Am I scaring you?
I'm
told you
like,
to-
okay,
I
all
told-
right.
I
Let's.
told you it's okay to be an asshole, and I told you fear works. Oh my God! Where is this podcast
It did.
going?
It did, Guy. No, I wanna change, and this is kind of the last question I wanted to ask, and this is something that is on a lot of people's minds, and it's about AI.
Yeah.
And my question is, it's a simple question: how are you using AI?
All right.
Today?
So you are not going to find a person who's more positive about AI than me. And today I interviewed someone named I blanked out on his name. Oh my God. He won the Turing Award. I mean, he's like the AI guy probably in the world. And he was explaining to me how ChatGPT and is Leslie Valiant. And he's like at such a different level. I told him, I'm not, it's not clear to me I'm qualified to interview you. My God, you're just like so far ahead of me. And I think that AI is the biggest deal that I have ever seen in my career. Now, I am old, so that's saying a lot. I think AI is bigger than personal computers. I think it's bigger than social media. I think it's bigger than the internet. Now, okay, so if you want to underplay AI, you say, well, it's just a large language model with billions of data points, and it's just very good at coming up with smooth conversation, syllable by syllable. Okay, I mean, that's one way of looking at AI, and quite frankly, that might be an honest and rational and reasonable explanation. But I gotta tell you something. I had an experience last night in preparing for this interview because I knew that the topic of AI was coming up. So I go to ChatGPT and I ask ChatGPT, should we teach the history of slavery to students in America? Okay. So ChatGPT says yes. The first word is yes. It's not like, oh, according to blah, 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 blah. It's yes. And here are 6 reasons why. And it's 6 really good reasons. And then the next question I prompt is, what about offending white people who say that you are wreaking havoc with their reputation, and you're doing them harm? And it says yes, that is a reasonable concern, but the upside of fostering greater information and greater equality so that something like this is prevented again is worth it, and something like that. And then I asked the prompt, well, what are the downsides of teaching the history of slavery? And it says, well, the downsides are that people may be traumatized by this memory coming back up. And I'm telling you, at the end of the day, if you read that transcript, you would think, God, guy, you just talked to someone extremely knowledgeable and extremely reasonable and extremely wise. And yet, I know in the back of my mind, it's just this computer putting syllable after syllable, right? And I'm thinking, shit. But there's this thing called the Turing test, and the Turing test basically says if you're having a conversation with something and you can't tell it's not human, then it's human. Well, I'm telling you, you can have a conversation with ChatGPT and not know that it's not a human. Now, if you work hard enough, you can find ways to trick it, right? So you can say, so you know what, has the Trump trial started in New York yet? Now, ChatGPT may answer and say, well, my data set is only as of, I don't know, August 2024. So at that time, the trial had not started. So now you can say, aha, I know it's not a person, it's ChatGPT, because ChatGPT has just admitted he doesn't, or she doesn't, or it doesn't have the data. So yes, you can trick that. But I can also tell you that you could have a conversation with many people, and maybe you won't think that person is a computer, but you'll think that person is stupid or a racist. And I'd rather have a computer with a conversation with a computer than a stupid racist person. So anyway, the bottom line is I love AI. Now you asked me how I use AI. I use AI as a research assistant for my writing. And I'll give you a real example from the book. In the growth section, one of my theories of growth is that some people make really big career changes. They shift completely careers. And I wanted examples because, you can testify that my book is full of examples, right? It's not just me blathering on. And so I wanted 5 or 6 good examples of people who made big career shifts. So I go into ChatGPT and I said, give me examples of people who made big career shifts and were extremely successful. And one of the examples it comes up with is Julia Child. Now, I know who Julia Child is. She's the French chef, the TV personality and the cookbook author. And I read it. It says, okay, so Julia Child, until her mid-30s, was working for the OSS, which is the precursor to the CIA. And then she married somebody in the CIA, and they moved to Paris, and she fell in love with French cooking. She learned how to cook French food. She wrote a cookbook, and then she became a TV star, media star in French cooking. I never, ever would have found that example. Like where, how would you go out into the world and say, I need an example of someone who made a big career shift? And I guess there's a chance that someone sitting in some audience would say, hey, yeah, I'm a French chef and I know that Julia Child was a spook. I can understand that could happen, but not, not in a timely manner. And then now, just to be honest, when I found that out from ChatGPT, my co-author, her name is Madison Neismer. And so I kicked in Madison GPT and I said, Madison, I just heard that Julia Child was a spook and then she became a chef and from ChatGPT, and ChatGPT makes shit up. So, Madison, kick in here and go do the research and find out if it's really true. I'm telling you with total certainty, that example would not be in my book were it not for ChatGPT.
Wow. Very, very, yeah, absolutely. Very powerful when it comes to research. Anything from, as you said, slavery. And the other day I was having a conversation with ChatGPT about buying the right dryer and where should we put it in the house. So that spectrum of conversations and research,
well, I mean, I think, when you read these articles, from the Washington Post or Wired or Fast Company, and they say, well, I tricked ChatGPT into trying to convince me to leave my spouse and starting a nuclear war, and that's the dangers of AI. Well, I gotta tell you, I asked Leslie Vaillant today point blank. I said, which is the more existential threat to mankind or AI? And he said mankind. So, I didn't do it with him, but there are many times I'm on a panel about AI, and I say it to the other panelists and the audience. So let's take nuclear weapons as a given. They exist. Somebody's going to launch them, right? Somebody has the ability to launch them. So here's a multiple choice test. I'll give you several choices of who can launch the missiles. Kim Jong-un, Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump, or ChatGPT. Pick who can launch the missiles. I don't know about you, but man, I am much more confident in ChatGPT than any of those 3 people launching a nuclear missile. Why do you laugh? I mean,
no, I'm with you. It's just the example is fascinating and the way you put it.
Okay, so if you like that example, here's another example. So now, going back to this ChatGPT on the history of slavery. So, I go to ChatGPT and I ask him, should we teach the history of slavery? And it says, yes, and here's 6 reasons. So, and I look at those reasons and it's about preventing the reoccurrence. It's about, people should come to grips with their past. And it's only by learning your past that you can avoid it, all that kind of stuff, right? All makes perfect sense to me. So that's one way you can figure out whether you should teach the history of slavery in American education. Here's another way. You can fly to Tallahassee, Florida, make an appointment with Ron DeSantis, say, hey, Ron, should we teach black history, slavery in schools? And see what Ron says. Now, whose answer would you prefer? I mean, I rest my case. I mean, okay, this machine is picking syllable next to syllable next to syllable. I'm telling you, it's more cogent than a lot of people in this world. You probably want to end the podcast now, huh?
Well, I was gonna go to rapid fire questions after that, but I mean the example for research and because no the reason is, one of the things that you hear people say about AI and its use when you're producing content is that, hey, once I do this, it's going to lose the value, or the content is written by an AI. What's the point of doing that? But I feel like, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, I feel like the curation of that and incorporation of that into a bigger message is a much more critical task and a harder task. What are your thoughts on
Yeah.
that kind of angle when people
Well,
talk about AI and content creation?
I listen, if I could go to ChatGPT and give it a prompt that says, give me a 50,000 word document that explains how to be remarkable, break it into 3 sections, 3 chapters per section. Each chapter handles one particular technique to be remarkable. Within each chapter, there are headings. Each heading starts with an active verb. Explain what to do, then tell a story, then produce 3 or 4 bullets that explain how to actually implement that head. And then at the end of the chapter, write a summary. At the end of each section, at the end of each heading, that section, write a summary so that people can know what they just read about. And then at the end of the chapter, add additional resources. And if I could tell ChatGPT to do that and it would write Think Remarkable, okay, my head would explode. My head would explode. I don't think it can do that now. So my attitude as a writer is, I guess if I were a copywriter, I might be threatened. But man, I've seen some copywriting from ChatGPT that is just clueless. Copywriting is an art, and if like I find it hard to believe that ChatGPT could come up with a slogan like "Just do it." Right? I mean, you think ChatGPT? No, I'm not saying you, but do you think ChatGPT could come up with a slogan? Just do it, or ChatGPT would design an ad campaign called "Think Different." There is no freaking way. There's no freaking way. So I would not be worried. I mean, a lot of it is just self-confidence. Now, it may force you to raise your game. Don't get me wrong, but is that bad? Now, as far as a writer, like I believe that my moral obligation to the readers, and you readers out there listening this, I take this very seriously. My job is to produce the best book for you to make a difference and be remarkable. The best book, whatever it takes, rubbing 2 sticks together, using IBM mainframes, whatever it takes, I should write the best book. And so I use ChatGPT, I use Quillbot, I use Claude, I use, what else did I use? I mean, I used everything I could to write you the best book. And so let me explain this with an eating metaphor. So let's say that you go out for dinner and you just want the best meal you can get, right? You just want delicious food. Do you stipulate to the restaurant, I do not want you using a microwave oven. I do not want you using an electric knife. I do not want you to use a KitchenAid mixer. I do not want you to use a convection oven. I just want you to use knives and charcoal and sticks. And that's how I want you to make the meal. Absolutely not. I don't want you to use any La Cornue oven. I don't want you to use any Miele dishwasher. I just want you to be an artisanal chef. I mean, maybe some people do, but I walk in a restaurant, I don't care what you use as long as it tastes good. And I hope, you take that attitude with my book, that you don't care what I use. It's just, If ChatGPT happened to come up with the example of Julia Child, and Julia Child resonates with you and provides you inspiration that you're in one kind of job and in your mid 30s you can switch and become a writer and a chef. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. I mean, you're going to complain that, oh my God, guy found that with ChatGPT. That's cheating. That doesn't inspire me anymore. Yeah, you're fighting the wrong battle, man. You gotta take it where you can get it and just
Go create a subcategory instead.
yeah, exactly.
Fight that battle.
My subcategory of business books is I've written the best book I can using any means I can to help you make a difference. That's my subcategory. I'm not inventing a new category of, non AI influenced writing. That's not me.
That food analogy just brings it home. It's such a great. It's just slightly more restrictive than gluten-free and dairy-free requirements. So
It's impossible book.
I have a couple of rapid fire questions. I think I got 3 rapid fire questions before we wrap up. So the first one that I'd love to know is, what is one resource that has had a fundamental impact on the way that you work or live? This could be a book, a blog, a talk, whatever it is. But what comes to mind?
Well, I mean, obviously, I would say a Macintosh. I could not do, what I do without a Macintosh. I also could not do what I do without Microsoft Word, which may, shock a few people. But I'm a power word user. Every paragraph in my manuscript is a style. Everything is in a style. So that's one thing. But I at a higher, more romantic level, I want to recommend a book called If You Want to Write by Brenda Ueland. Now, this is a book written for writers, but it's for any creative process. And the gist of this book is that, if you want to write. Don't wait for permission. You don't have to get a PhD in English. You don't have to take a course in creative writing. You don't have to you don't have to listen to people tell you that you're not a quote writer. Just for crying out loud, write. And so substitute the verb write and, put in, make movies, take pictures, sing, dance, program, whatever you want. So I highly recommend If You Want to Write by Brenda Ueland. And let me tell you something, when an author tells you to buy somebody else's book, there is no higher form of praise. It's like a chef. It's like a chef saying, okay, where do you go after your restaurant is closed? And all the chefs go to this really late night dive. That's where you should go.
If you want to write, I definitely am going to check this out. Guy, if you could give one advice to marketers, what would it be?
Why does it have to be one? If I could give one advice to marketers, I would say go and be the customer. Don't study the customer. Don't analyze the customer. Don't watch the customer. Actually be the customer. And let me give you an example from the book. One of my friends, his name is Martin Lindstrom, and an Italian pharmaceutical company wanted to, quote, get closer to the customer. And marketers, when you hear that phrase, get closer to the customer, that parses to $5 million McKinsey contract. Okay, so what he did instead of a $5 million McKinsey contract is he took the management of the pharmaceutical into a room and he gave them all straws and he told them, okay, for the next few minutes, you have to breathe through the straw. So they did that, with some frustration and difficulty. It's not that easy a thing to do, to breathe through a straw for a few minutes. And at the end of the exercise, he said, okay, you're a pharmaceutical. You want to get closer to the customer. Now you know what it's like to have asthma. That's how asthmatics live. It's like breathing through a straw your whole life. So my advice to marketers is, what's the straw you need to breathe through to really understand your market? If you're in the car business, don't just read about Edmunds reports or Blue Book reports or consumer reports about cars. If you want to understand a minivan, for crying out loud, go buy a minivan. And you go buy a minivan, and I hope you have 2 kids, 2 strollers, 2 baby seats, and 2 baby bags. Go and be that customer, and then you'll truly understand how to make a better minivan. It's not by watching people. It certainly is not by focus groups where you bring in young couples who have kids, and you put them in a room, and you ask them, questions about how the ideal minivan would work. And I think in a focus group, I kind of think focus groups are useless, because I think in a focus group, you're so cognizant of, oh, I want to look cool, right? I don't want to say that, oh shit, man, I cannot handle these two kids with these two baby seats, with these two strollers, with these two baby bags. I just can't handle it anymore. You want to be cool. Say, oh yeah, I need in my minivan, I need black matte exterior, and I need lowered wheels because I'm a cool dad, because you're trying to impress the person next to you in the focus group. So anyway, long answer to go and be the customer. Don't just go and see. Don't just go and study. Go and be the customer. Oh, another very real world thing is, go and be the customer. Go figure out. Go and try to sign. Go to try to download your app, install your app, and oh my God, open up an account on your app. And then when your app says, oh, guess what? We require two-factor authorization, right? And okay, so now we're going to figure out two-factor authorization, but I'm not with, it's not convenient for me. And, my email, I don't know. There's like so many things that can go wrong. And then God help you. Then now you're at that first screen and you say, okay, so you need to pick the pictures, all the pictures with the bicycles in them. And there's like this 4x4 matrix. And like, is that a freaking bike, or is that just a kickstand? And does the kickstand count? And oh, there's a picture of a bicycle in a store window. Is it just the bikes that are physically there, or is it the pictures? And I have never, ever, ever, ever completed a capture like that the first time. Never.
Oh, man.
Right. And so if you're a marketer, go through your onboarding process. I think you'll be depressed.
That multi-factor authentication example is just absolutely golden.
Well,
I feel like people have figured out what to do. They have a solution for this now. If you have to select those photos, and if they feel like you haven't got it, they will give you more photos. Pick. And I'm like,
that's why I do it 5 times. Yeah. And with AI, I don't know about you, but there's like GoPro does this, and I think Perplexity does it, or somebody, but now there's this kind of thing where the only way you can sign in is by giving them your email address or your phone number, and then they text you a second factor. So even if you knew your name and password, you cannot get in that way. You have got to wait until you get the text message. The text message is the entree. And well, for one thing, how come I can't get that text message to WhatsApp? Maybe I don't like messages. I mean, I don't understand. I swear to God, I have about, I could tell you, I'll look right now. I have in my AI folder, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and Perplexity. And I tell you, some of them, they say, all right, to sign in, you got to give us the email address that's your account. And then we're going to send you an email with a 6-digit number that you put in to sign in. And how many freaking barriers can you put in front of me? I just want to ask, how do I add a HP printer to a Wi-Fi network? I'm not trying to break into Fort Knox. I'm not trying to I'm not trying to get into the state of Arizona voting machines. I just want to ask, how do I add a HP printer to a Wi-Fi network? Why do I need such authorization? It just makes me crazy.
Can't get in that easy these days. Can't get in that easy. Let me ask the last question, Guy. And I might be surprised by this answer. I might know.
Unlike the other answers I've given you.
No. You'll see what I mean, because my last question is, who is the most remarkable person you've ever met?
Jane Goodall.
I am surprised by that answer.
Well, who do you think I was going to say?
Not because I was not sure if the answer is going to be Steve Jobs. Well, that was why.
I tell you why. Because I think that Jane Goodall, I know her much better than Steve Jobs. I was never in his inner circle, and I don't know if anybody really knew Steve Jobs, but I know of Jane Goodall fairly well. And listen, I went to her birthday party a few weeks ago. She's 90 years old. She's 90 years old, and she's on the road 300 days a year.
Wow.
300 days a year. Now, when I travel, I go and make a 1 hour keynote. So I get to the airport, the limo picks me up, I go to the hotel, I go to sleep, I wake up, I speak, I leave. If there's a long delay, I go to the spa or whatever, right? But when Jane Goodall travels, she's meeting with schools and teachers and kids and donors and not for profits in the area and government agencies. I mean, she's busy every freaking second of the day. A guy only has to be on deck for 1 hour, right? And there's no way I could travel 300 days a year. And she has, and despite that kind of schedule, she has always said yes to me. I mean, from the outside looking in, I bet most people think it takes an act of God to get Jane Goodall to write a foreword for your book. And it was relatively easy for me. Now, and that's not because Guy is so powerful and so influential. That's because Jane Goodall is such a good person. Such a good person. And I think that she just embodies grace and graciousness. And so I think that's what makes her rise above everybody else in my book. Her grace and graciousness.
On that note, Guy, that's a great note. That's a great note to wrap up the podcast. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, it's been fun. I hope you don't have to take too much out.
This was a great conversation. This is a great conversation.
We may not have sold any books, but we had fun. That's the key. All right, take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Take care, Guy.
Bye-bye.
Today's episode of Growth Colony was produced by Alexander Hipwell and Liza Maywald. It was edited by Dave Samito with additional editing by Liza Maywald and music arrangement by Alexander and Liza. Special thanks to Tina Wabe. We couldn't make the show without you. Growth Colony is hosted by Shahin Hoda, Director of Growth at Xgrowth. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Do you think you'd be a great guest or just keen for a chat? Send through an email at podcast@xgrowth.com.au. That's podcast@xgrowth.com.au. That's all for now. We'll catch you next week, right here on Growth Colony.